Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, September 15th, and it's 5:32 p.m. This is the Groton Town Council Long-Term Recovery Committee. And with us this evening, we have Town Manager Burt, Councilors Bordelon, Aubrey, Baumgardner. Moderator Eben was here. Her call must have dropped.
She's coming back in.
Okay, thank you. Human Services Director Fondulis, and from Planning and Development Services, Mr. Bronk and Ms. Harkin. I think
Mayor
that's
Hedrick.
everyone. Oh, Mayor Hedrick, excellent. Thank you, Mayor, for being here. Oh, there's Moderator Evan. I knew I saw you, and then you disappeared like poof.
No, there was no audio or sound, or whatever. So
Yeah, I just got back. Sierra Patrick should be logging on momentarily as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so we definitely have all our people here. I just wanted to note that Representative Conley did reach out to say she can't be here on her laptop. She may be able to phone in, but she may not have a phone signal to be able to do so. So she will try if she can get here, but we thank her for notifying us that there might be an issue with attending this evening. All right, approval of minutes, 2021-652, September 1st, 2021, long-term recovery meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was that? I wasn't looking.
Portia.
I
Portia
moved.
moved. Councilor Bordelon moved.
I moved, Madam Mayor.
Okay, moved by Baumgardner. Thank you for clarifying. And seconded by Bordelon. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes of September 1st, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously. Oh,
Mayor, Representative Conley has arrived.
yes, I just noticed that. Thank you, Representative Conley, for joining us. Hopefully your signal holds for you to be with us via phone. All right, so we are on to item number 4. We just approved the minutes. And we are on to item 4, which is 2021-2085 ARPA funding allocation and distribution process. And Mr. Burt, I'm not sure if you want to take this over, if you want to turn it over to your team, but I had a quick question before you start. Can you please let this body know if you're going to be expecting recommendations from us? So if you would like us to recommend certain things this evening, that way we can kind of have that in our head as we're conferring.
Sure, and we'll need guidance on this first one.
Okay.
On this first, let me turn this on 1 second. On this first one, we're looking at doing business outreach, bringing in some key business leaders, sort of like we did with our key partners for nonprofits. We're looking at probably about 10 to 12 business leaders to meet with the group. Planning staff, let me pull it out. Planning staff did put together some names to start with. If you'd like me to go over those. Again, we're shooting for it to be manageable in the 10 to 12 range. Here's some names that they've thrown out. Bruce Flax, since he's the executive director of the Mystic Chamber. Tony Sheridan. Adam Young, who's the owner of SIFT and Young Buns. Dan Meiser, the owner of the Oyster Club, chair of the Connecticut Restaurants Association. Aaron Simoni, how do you say it? Simonici, however you say that, owner of Beard Brewery and board of directors for the Connecticut Brewers Guild. Bill Groves, chair of the town EDC and VP of Berkshire Bank. Jason Rusk, who's chairing the Groton City EDC. Judith Lamson Rockwell, who's the SBDC counselor at Sector. So the small business development counselor there. So how many is that? That 8 there? So that's 8, looking for maybe another 2 or 4. If people have some ideas on others that might be appropriate.
The only thing I'm noticing is you have a heavy Mystic presence with the exception of Beard and Mr. Russ from the city. But I would like to see if we can get anyone from the downtown area of Groton. Are there any merchants there that might be available to meet?
Planning staff would know more, I know Chris Reagan. I don't know, I know too many more in that area.
Shame on you.
The gentleman from Manana, perhaps, Mr.
Oh yeah,
Freeman.
Justin.
We could ask Justin fairly easily.
I did know two.
Okay.
Hey, Justin?
So we see, I have Counselor Bordelon and Baumgartner. I saw Baumgartner's hand first. Counselor Baumgartner, you have the floor.
And sorry to interrupt, Sarah Patrick has arrived.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Patrick. Let me add you to the list. Ms. Patrick, we are on item 2021-208-5, ARPA funding allocation and distribution process. We're on the first item, which is the business outreach, and where Mr. Burt was compiling a list of names of potential businesses to invite. So that's where we are. All right, Councilor Baumgartner, I apologize. Back to you.
No apologies whatsoever. You didn't do anything wrong. Thank you so much. Just to see a kind of a surprisingly lack of minority and women-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. And I know there are no shortage of them throughout our entire town. I'm sure whether it's through the Women's Business Development Center or other organizations, civic organizations, that we can reach out to some folks, again, minority-owned businesses or entrepreneurs, as well as women entrepreneurs as well. Very important to have that representation. I know, those groups have been hit the hardest during COVID, as many women, I was reading, are, especially with COVID, managing their families, managing their businesses, have been really hit the hardest. And we've seen women returning to the workforce at a much slower rate than we would certainly like to see. And so, that discussion, I think, is very timely and important here in Groton. And so, I'd definitely like to focus our attention to the businesses that are really most in need. And certainly know, the names you mentioned have been businesses that really, I think, have, flourished before the pandemic and were hit hard. You think about Beard, and when they opened, they could not serve food. So therefore, they had to remain closed throughout the duration of COVID all of last year, and that certainly hit them. Luckily, they have a very loyal following that they've cultivated over the years, and have been able to rebound very quickly. But not all throughout our town have been able to share that success story as well. So I'd certainly like to augment the existing list that we have, that I think is a great foundation to start from. Nothing further. Thank you.
And Mayor Hensler, I'm sorry.
I just add to that, yeah, point well taken. And I should mention, this is not going to be the end all be all. This is to get some initial feedback of what is missing out there as we go into the larger reaching out to businesses and public. Yeah,
Mayor Hendrick, I was going to suggest Mr. Jeanette, who's a contractor in the city. Do you think that might be something he would be interested in?
Yeah, I do. Frank Jeanette would be one. His wife B runs steps, but that's not a business. So if we're focusing on businesses, then that wouldn't be appropriate. But Frank Jeanette is a business owner.
Is it Jeanette Construction?
And he's a minority. Say again?
Is it Jeanette Construction? I can't remember what the title of his business is.
Yes.
do you have his contact info you could send me offline?
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you. Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I think this is a really well done list. Some things that I would like to see myself, and looking at it, is more of a disbursement of the style of business. We're very restaurant heavy on this. I know they were heavily hit, but I think when we look at a business structure, we should be looking at businesses as a whole, and looking at not only restaurants, but kind of collaborating to have other styles. So maybe 5 restaurants, maybe 5 other unique style businesses. That way we really paint a nice picture of exactly how this is affecting our businesses, not just the restaurant industry heavily, which they have been hit pretty hard. So I think looking at the numbers, I would like to see a little bit more outreach just for the diversity of businesses, and diversity meaning what they provide for service. Is there a way, I know we had spoke before under economic development, And I think it's really important to have a database of sorts of our businesses in our town so that we can draw from that. John, have we established anything like that yet that we could utilize in this situation?
I believe that's been in progress for a while, but I'll let Paige and Tabitha answer that since they'd be the ones keeping that.
Yeah, because I think that would be very helpful in this. This is another example where that database and having a place to pull from for our resources and knowing our businesses in our community versus like, hey, do you know Joey over here or Tom over there? If we actually compile those into a program, we would be able to pull them more easily. Thank you.
Mr. Bronk, you've had your hand up, sir. Did you wish to speak?
You're muted, Paige.
I always do that. Yeah, I guess I'll touch on that point. We definitely need a better business database. Coincidentally, I was on a call today. CCM is looking to partner with Groton and New London to help in developing a more robust database. It's a statewide problem, actually. We do have a limited database, but really that's gathered through an old approach, basically face-to-face, those who sign up for Explore More, business card exchange, those types of things. We know we have not captured the full extent of businesses, particularly primary contact information. So we're always working on that, and it helps on when we're trying to reach out to businesses, whether it's plastics, COVID, information about Arpa funding across the board. So that's an ongoing effort. The specific point that I had wanted to make is I think we were seeking representatives of the business as a whole in Groton. So it's appropriate to have businesses come and speak with this committee, but we didn't envision that we were capturing all businesses at this given time. At this level, we were looking for basically an understanding from key business interests as to what they're experiencing. What are the problems? We know about labor problems. We know about supply chain problems. We want to get that type of information so that we can best address whatever programs and projects they need. That, of course, is quite different from an individual business who says, hey, I would love to get $10,000 so I can pivot for marketing for my particular business. So I just wanted to bring that up. And we want to hear any and all interest, but I think at this upcoming meeting, where we want to speak with these representatives, we're looking for more of a broad brush so we can develop consensus on what the needs are for this first phase of the needs assessment.
Okay.
That's really just input going into just that, phase one, which will then evolve to include more things. Just a starting point.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. We'll go with Ms. Patrick, Moderator Eben, and Councilor Aubrey. I can't control the hands, Mr. Byrd. I apologize. So
What's that?
I can't control the hands, so I'm trying to keep track of who's already spoken and whose hands are still up. So it's here, Ms. Patrick, you have the floor.
So a few questions. One, may I receive the list of businesses? I don't have a copy of that. Also, when is the meeting that we were expecting to have businesses speak to this group?
That's part of what we're going to talk about next. That's part of this
Okay.
subject.
Okay. And yeah, I think Paige just kind of helped answer some of the questions I had for what the forum was, what we're expecting from the meeting. So yeah, that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Moderator Eben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to really echo what Councillor Baumgartner said about having a nice diversity of, and who is being asked, whether it's women or minority-owned businesses. I think that's really important. I'd like to get a copy of the list too, if that's possible. It did seem a little heavy on Mystic. As the mayor mentioned, it did seem heavy on frankly, white business owners. And I think that Councilor Bordelon had a really good comment, which is to get the diversity of kind of sectors, business sectors. I know for one, landlords have been hit, and we've talked a lot about Unite CT. My husband is a small business owner, a contractor, and also a landlord. And Unite CT is a slow, difficult process. And I think it would be really useful for this group and others to hear about that, because that program, from what I have heard, is not working as, this body thinks it might be. There's a lot of money. In fact, most of the money has still been undispersed because of procedural problems and how they, how they communicate with the people who are requesting the money, as far as I can tell. So I do think it would be good to, make sure that we have, the variety of businesses, although I hear Mr. Bronk's desire to just have a few main ones. I think you're not going to hear about all the needs that exist unless you get all those kinds of businesses at the table. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Aubry.
I just mentioned when we get to the kind of the round table, the second agenda item on here, Marge Fondulis is with us, and she now has someone trained in Unite CT, and she can give us a bit of an update at that time.
Great, thank you. All right, Counselor Aubry.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there's several women that own businesses in downtown Groton. You have the boot shop. That's 2 women that run that. You have 2 beauty shops that are run by women. You have stores in Mystic that are run by women. I don't think it would be too difficult to come up with, Joseph John's Beauty Power right in the middle of downtown Groton has been run by a woman for years. I think we could get a much better perspective from them, and I think it would round out the group. I understand that everybody has had problems, but I think we need to be talking to the smaller businesses and really reaching out to them to come in. I mean, I know myself, I own a business, and I've had no success with things that I've attempted to do. So, but that's a different thing. But I think we need smaller female-owned businesses to be much more a part of this. I'm not particularly impressed with the initial list. Sorry, Paige, but I want to see small businesses come and talk with us. They're the ones that are really struggling.
So would the boot shop be Mary Barber?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have her contact information. Maybe if you have ideas, you can send them off to Mr. Bronk or Mr. Bird, and then they could kind of winnow things down and figure out which way to go with it.
Sure.
And the sooner the better, since we'll want to get invites out soon.
Right.
I will stop and ask them for their information.
Great.
Thank you very much for the time.
Any other first-time speakers before we go to second time? Oh, Mr. Bronk, did you want to add something?
Thank you. Just to clarify, yeah, I'm definitely in support of any and all businesses. I just want to make sure that's clear. I just wanted to clarify that our initial role was to get representation from business groupings. So I clearly understand that we want to do something more than restaurant and more than Mystic. I support that. Another name I'd like to throw out there is it's the Wildflower Salon, which is in Pequannock. But to some degree, the more we cherry pick individual businesses, the more we're leaving out. So we wanted to make sure we cast a wide net before we go down too deep, because there'll be other opportunities as well, including the Bang the Table platform that we would like to use to actually drill down and get significant individual input from individuals and businesses.
Thank you.
I like Bang the Table.
Councilor Bordelon, did you wish to speak again?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it would be helpful to have, I think, moving forward as we progress and try to move these meetings more frequently, any information we can have on the front end would be helpful. So the list of those businesses might have triggered some of these thoughts prior to, and it might have also then segued into some bringing names to put forward. So once again, it's not a criticism that it was restaurant heavy, but I do, like Paige just said, wildflowers is another thing, salons. There's so many businesses that make up Groton. Sift and some of the other restaurants are heavy, hard names that people know and we see all the time. And but we need to dig a little deeper for those other ones that are not falling on the radar. And I think it is really important to also advertise this on the website. I can respect the fact that you stated tonight that you wanted to have a small, quaint group. And that's why the importance of 8 restaurants or 5 restaurants. If we're only going to have 10 or 15, we want to bring some others in. But I think to bring in businesses, we need to be advertising that. We should have been, advertising, utilizing. We have so much social media at our disposal. Those are things that can be done again on the back end before this meeting with the list that you guys have generated, but an all call out there so that I could share it, other folks can share it. We all are kind of looking and conquering the town as a whole. But I think it's really important to have small business represented here in a diverse tapestry of folks in their individual. I think of the yarn lady that does the yarn shop. I think, I know Councillor Aubry brought up the boots. There's tons of things. And I can respect the fact that we're looking at what orders and supplies, as was stated before by Mr. Bronk. But if you look at a restaurant supply issue, it's not going to be the same as the yarn lady or the boot person or this person. So I think it's important that we have all that representation because everyone's been affected differently, and we're going to find gaps and trends and holes where other people actually did quite well during COVID. So those are things I'd like to see. And one quick question for Bronk. As new businesses come in, because they have to get licensed and stuff, are you capturing those and starting to save those in a database?
We actually get copies of all of the paperwork that comes through the clerk's office, but not all of it. So we do capture it. But that's not always the best primary email address, surprisingly. And oftentimes, if it's an LLC, corporation, we don't necessarily get the primary data. So it's helpful. We do capture it, but it's a small fraction of the whole. There is a huge gap. We have roughly 1,500 businesses in town. Of course, not all bricks and mortar, but we only have several hundred businesses in our database, and that rely on in terms of what their address is, what their name is, what their email is. So we don't have as robust of a system as we would like. And like I said, that's a statewide problem, and CCM is helping with that.
So when they come in and they address themselves as a business and they're paying taxes, they have an address for taxes. So maybe it might be a mail outreach initially, but I would think there might be a way to utilize some of that information we're getting because they're paying taxes, correct or no?
I would imagine they're paying taxes.
Right. So
but...
yes, the contact is there. So I asked another, just looked at another town where with the paid things and how do they capture, and they're saying they capture them because they pay taxes to the town. So if they don't have an email on file and they pay their taxes, when you send that bill out, you can send a flyer in that envelope asking there are better ways to contact them for that. So I just think that every tax season we have a way to grab them, and I just would love to capture them. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Burt, yes.
I was just going to mention, looking at that initial list, there's, I guess, 4 of them that would be considered Mystic. I don't think it's quite as lopsided as said, only 3 are restaurants, but the rest are more broad. Part of it is people like Bruce will talk to all kinds of businesses, people like Tony Sheridan, you've got Adam Young who owns multiple businesses. So we're trying to hit people that can bring more than just their own, but I agree with balancing it out. But I just wanted to talk a little more about the reasoning, and I think it was pretty sound reasoning.
Thank you. So do you have what you need from us for item 1 there?
Well, we need now to talk about the timing. If we try to do this in 2 weeks, it's going to be hard, I think, to get a good representation.
Okay.
We might need a little more time than that. We could do it, but I don't know if it'll be as good as waiting just a little bit longer. But what's the committee's wishes for holding it?
Could it be done so we're on the 15th right now. 2 weeks is too far, so could it be the week of the 6th of October? Would that give you 3 weeks?
Definitely better than 2.
You think 3 weeks, Mr. Bronk?
I think 3 weeks is definitely workable. I would be concerned on 2 weeks.
Okay. Ms. Patrick?
Bronk, if you need me to give you some businesses or potential people to connect to on the city side, just let me know.
That'd be great too, if you hand give them to me too.
Mhm.
Okay.
Like what grouping that might be missing that you need to fill the gap in from the current list that you guys have.
If you just think of good people, we can flush it out and, replace some that are good on the other side, but just to make it more well-rounded. So if you just see some good, diverse people, diverse businesses.
Okay, great. Counselor Bordon, did you have something on the timing of this? Because we have other things we have to get to as well.
I thought you were asking about the timing. Is that correct? You'd like?
What I just asked, yes.
Want to make sure, because you have other things to get to, and I want to make sure I'm in the right spot.
You have an opinion on the timing?
But of course I do. Yes. I think it's really important that we are working on the back end on this, to come in and have, one thing I heard is folks want relief and they need it. And to wait 3 more weeks to come up with names, I feel we're meeting more frequently, but we're not doing, I feel we could be doing work on the back end. So contacting the city about what names and shops that they would recommend. There's folks on here that, that could be contacting each other. Like moderator Evans said, she didn't have the numbered names. Sierra didn't have the names. I didn't have the names of shops. So I'm just trying to figure out a way to move this along a little faster, because while we sit here, another 3 weeks will pass and our intentions are great, but we're not moving along just to get names. So on the back end, so like when we leave each meeting, we should have a little bit of homework of back work of what we're planning to achieve by the next meeting, so we can actually work it in real time. So I just would like to see a better format. Thank you.
So I think there's a misunderstanding. Mr. Bird, I'll let you take it.
Okay. The actual meeting with the businesses would be in 3 weeks. We'll have the names within the next couple of days. In terms of the back end, we just put this list together today. We are meeting rather quickly. But the reason the agenda packet also has the meat of it in there is so you can get thinking about it too. So we were doing our part of the homework. We expect other people to read those agenda packs and do the same thing and come to the meeting. So it's not just on our shoulders, but we will be on October 6th actually having people here.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner, did you have an opinion on the timing of the meeting?
Yeah, I was just about to say on, not on the timing of the meeting, just one more point about, who we can reach out to and, before then, different business groups and resources on how to get the information. I'm sure in Mayor Hedrick, I'm sure he can do this, but reach out to Groton Utilities to get a list of folks who, businesses that are utility customers. I'm sure that's a very handy list that the utilities wouldn't mind, submitting to support, our local businesses.
And just a reminder, we're still going to keep it to about maybe up to 15 people because some few won't show up, but the others we can start making a database for the next rounds to make sure we reach out to.
Great, thank you. Okay, so then we are on to ARPA near-term funding needs. And do you want to introduce this, Mr. Burton?
Sure.
Could I just ask a quick question? Is this meeting going to be in person or virtual? Sorry, I just wanted to understand your dynamics. on the meeting.
Probably virtual, I would imagine, since that's what we're all around doing right now.
And what's the point then of limiting it to 15?
Well, we're not doing the broader, we just want to get some key industries and have time to actually talk to those people within a reasonable amount of time. There'll be more opportunities for other businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Point of clarification, my other question to you with that was, I think it's important not to limit diversity of opinions and thoughts in our community. And as a business owner, I would be very upset if you chose, I don't know, one of the high performing ones over me. So I think it's important that you limit it to 15 because that's your choice that you want it to be quaint, but is that the consensus of the whole group? I mean, I think we should take a consensus on that feeling because I don't know that I can support that first. I would like to see 20 to 25. Second, so before we move forward with that. Second, I think if we're going to limit it, we should be reaching out and saying, here's our time frame in which we'd like to hear from you back by. It's going to be a small, quaint group. but please submit your suggestions and concerns. And this group should have a email that's generated with what the need is that we're going to be asking these folks, so that they can send an email, and that can be just as powerful. And that's still allowing the voice to be present and have a say of where they're having trouble. So I just would encourage, as much as we want to have a 15 body representation, I think that really could limit our service and our span of what we're here to do. And I think allowing folks to be able to email. So is there a spreadsheet or a form that we're going to send, or what questions are you guys thinking before we move the topic? I think that's really important. And do we all agree that it should only be 15? Is that a couple people? Is that the whole body? I think it's important to be a part of this group. We all are active voices and members, and we should make sure that that is the way we want to proceed. So my first question is, what were we going to be asking them, and can that be sent out in an email?
So I'm going to jump in right here. Our job is to work with town staff. Town staff is putting together their process in a manner that they feel will be effective. It has been explained multiple times this evening why they are taking their approach they're taking. They're starting with a small group, and then they will do additional outreach afterwards. We as a group of elected officials need to trust our staff to take on some of this work and make the contacts for us. They gave us this agenda packet well in advance, and I would hope that people would share their concerns prior to meetings, or at least start gathering thoughts prior to meetings. There's a concern for getting things done in a timely manner. If we keep stalling and stalling on this, we won't get things done in a timely manner, and they won't make the October 6th date. So my gut on this, and I hope others will agree, is that we should trust this plan and have the town staff working with the city staff go ahead with this plan for the initial meeting of the small group, followed by additional meetings that will be broader. We also need to talk about the near-term funding, make a decision on that. And we also have to talk about the public outreach process. So our staff has been working behind the scenes. This is their job. This is what they do all day. We have two jobs, right? So we have to count on them to do their thing. And we kind of have to trust the professionals to give us some background and give us a starting point. And I think they have listened to us, and they've heard us express our concerns regarding the focus on certain areas of town, or the lack of diversity, or the lack of diversity in businesses. And they've acknowledged that, and they have said they're willing to work with us and take our thoughts into consideration. So I would ask this body if we could move on from the first one and trust what the staff has put together for item 1, the COVID business outreach. Is there consensus to move forward with item 1? Is there any objection? Well, I know there's one objection, but do others object?
I was just voting with my hand.
Are you objecting, or are you?
Oh, I'm all in favor of what you said.
Okay.
Patrice, I'm sorry to just bust in, but I think in my comments, I made clear what I thought, which is, I do think there needs to be greater diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity. I do think there needs to be greater diversity in terms of the sector, the business sectors that are invited, so that you hear from landlords and contractors and beauty salons and, small retail owners. So, grocery stores perhaps. So, liquor stores. I guess I think, since it's virtual, I'm not quite sure why it has to be limited. So I think I would be disagreeing, because the list that I just heard, and I haven't seen it, and I did look at the agenda before, but it does not contain this list, does not contain a lot of diversity. I got to be honest, in my mind. And there were some suggestions that I think were great that were given here today, but I would prefer to have more diversity, both, as I just mentioned. And so, as long as the comments that are reflected here are incorporated, I'm happy to go with the staff expertise, but I think also they have to listen to what we're saying. And I heard that from at least 3 different people on this meeting.
Yes, and I think if you could just revisit briefly, I think they are hearing us, and I would just like for you to revisit the purpose of this initial meeting, Mr. Burke, please.
Yeah, in order to start the phase one, we just want some ideas of what some of the issues are out there before we get into the meat of things. Everybody throwing out, I want 10,000 for this. We want some people with some broad diversity who hit different areas preferably that just feed us what they're hearing. Just like council members hear things, people in some of these positions hear things, and they can give us a broad range just so we can kind of get that in mind as we're actually going into the real outreach. But we totally hear, we'll make sure there's a diverse group, totally hear that. And, if you give us the leeway, as we see what names people come up with, maybe it will grow a little bit, if you give us that leeway. And just so that the group knows, the staff does meet on every off week and spends and I'll tell you, Tabitha and them spend a whole lot of time on it, but we do all meet and really, really hammer through what we think is going to be effective.
Okay, thank you. So we have to go on to near-term funding right now. So Mr. Burt, could you tell us a little bit about what you mean by near-term, please?
This sort of a race takes the place of the term emergency funding, because some of what we're seeing, we've talked about needing a pot of money that is available more quickly rather than waiting through a whole process. And we've already seen some of this. We've seen Ledge Light, we've seen the COG. We'll hear from Marge Fondulis later, see what her needs are, but I want money available for also her department. So if we suddenly have an influx, I know we haven't seen it at this point, but if we see an influx of evictions and other things, money that the council already has set aside for these things and that they can draw on for if they get other requests. We know we're gonna need money for a position for the town we'll call it the navigator position, just because that's what the COG called it. But so what we would like to do is get a recommendation from this group for an amount of money to recommend to the council to set aside for those dollars that the council and RTM could approve uses as they come up if needed to bypass the whole application process. So we've already committed 86,000-ish for the navigator position, or for the Ledge Light. We've done 56,000 for the navigator, or for the navigator. I'd like to have a pot of money, I don't know what the right amount is, just for things, available that Marge could draw from if needed. I don't know, 50,000's the right amount, whatever it may be. We need a certain amount for the position, to start to get that going for the planning department, which will also help in the finance. So I wanted to get an idea of what do you think is an appropriate amount of money out of the total 8.6 million.
Okay, and would human services be included in the total amount here? So when we're looking at it, we'll include her. Okay, very good. Mr. Bronk, go ahead if you want to pick up.
Thank you. I think staff has been asked repeatedly how we can expedite things. And clearly, we're concerned about ensuring we meet federal requirements. We're seeing other municipalities that may be handing out funds quicker, but our questions are, well, what are the needs? And are they necessarily complying with the federal requirements and ultimately the reporting requirement? So just as a recap, we believe it's important to go through this needs assessment. However, we also understand there's an immediate need, maybe an urgent need, which has been discussed, where we're going to have a bucket for this urgent money for those that need to receive this money sooner rather than later. And I think that's the purpose of basically creating this particular bucket and an allocation, so there's some flexibility that the town has for these short-term needs.
And Mayor, I was going to have Marge do an update, of course, later, but maybe she wants to touch on. I just heard from her in the last day that they haven't seen the influx yet, but I wanted to kind of hear her thoughts on an amount just for the human services portion that might be possibly needed in the short term.
That's a great idea, but if I could interrupt for 1 second,
Okay.
Councillor Aubry has to leave soon. Is there anything you wanted to add, Councillor Aubry, before you go?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I guess I would say, I understand what Paige was trying to do, and I recognize that because he was bringing on people that spoke for a larger group. And I think that was excellent. And I hope some of those people will still be part of it and then balance it with some of the smaller businesses. Your thought process is so much greater than what we're thinking of right now. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Councillor Aubry.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. I apologize, Director Fondulis. If you'd like to give us a brief, Mr. Burt, if you wanted to introduce or just have Director Fondulis begin?
Sure, and Director Fondulis, Marge, you just sent me an update on where you're at on things in the last 2 days, I believe. If you just kind of want to recap that, and then what you think are potential needs you see coming up, even if you don't know for sure it's going to hit, what you think might be an amount of money we would want to set aside just in case to cover the, we can always add on to it. Just have at least a decent starting spot for human services.
Well, I had initially responded to an email that John Reiner had sent asking department heads to spell out, if they could, what specific areas they might need to utilize some of the ARPA funding for. And I had responded to him that the funds, as I see them, could supplant some of the monies that we currently have in our donations trust fund, in our Groton Utilities Assistance Fund, in various other funds that we currently use to assist people. If we could supplant some of those monies with the ARPA funding, then that would, of course, preserve the funding that we have available that we normally have to rely on for the future, which when we're not going to have this extra funding available. So that was one thought I had. We're assisting people continuously with rents, not mortgages, primarily rents and utilities and fuel assistance, and occasionally extraneous costs to help them with work-related expenses, either job search expenses or actual employment-related expenses, transportation, etc. The ARPA funding help with such things as childcare, which is something that we don't normally have the ability to get involved with because we don't have the resources. So there are areas that we could help with in addition to what we currently do that would help people with their job search, their entry into employment, retaining the roof over their head, whether it's an apartment, a house, whatever, and helping with the transportation costs, et cetera. I had suggested that I would recommend grants to local households of, say, 500 to 800 one time a year with this ARPA funding that would be to help with rent or utilities, whatever the pressing need was, or maybe to divide it between a couple of those needs. We would work that out as we normally, when we have anyone apply for assistance, we first assess, if there's any income, what the expenses are, what's the most pressing need they have. And because we do have generally limited funds that we have to make sure we stretch as far as we can under normal circumstances, we have a limit now of $400 that we assist a household per year with, whether it's utility, rent, whatever. And that is, we could expand that assistance using the ARPA funds. I had come up with a total for the 3-year total of $800,000 going to a human services assistance or basic needs fund, a line item in the ARPA funding. And that was basically $800 a year to approximately 330 households times 3 years. And that was just the best I could, of a ballpark figure that I could come up with. Having said all this, at the present time, and this is what I shared with John recently, at the present time, we are rather curious about the fact that we're not getting a lot of requests for assistance with rent. We are getting no requests for Unite CT. We are getting about a little less than the average number of requests for utility payments. And we're not sure if this is because people are still, they're getting through the food stamp or the SNAP program, they're getting an extra benefit based on the number of children in the family. There are still some resources that have been available to people through stimulus or whatever. I think I just read recently too that there's going to be another stimulus payment going out. I may be mistaken, but I thought I had read that. So at any rate, we're not quite sure what is happening, but we're not getting a lot of eviction notices either. We're not getting on anywhere near than we would normally get, maybe in the course of a month, 4 to 7 eviction notices. And some might be worked out before the actual eviction date, but others would go through the process. But we're not getting that kind of contact. So we're not quite sure what's going on. But I don't know if there's a flood that's going to happen or not. But that's where things stand at the present time.
And Mayor,
Thank
and
you.
one thing I want to make sure is we don't get over Marge over your head in terms of we'll still need to do the same processes of, evaluating the needs. They'll have to, it has to be for those affected by COVID. So they'll have to attest to that.
Yeah.
It won't be money handed over to them. It'll be direct payments to things like utilities that they need.
Very, very good point. Exactly. We never hand a check or to a client directly. We always pay the utility or the landlord, et cetera.
Right. And then also keep in mind that we're looking at maybe a CDBG style program to also help people with their home things, which would also run through the plannings type style of CDBG process too. And if we're talking some of these dollars, we're probably starting to look at using a whole lot of our funds between these couple of programs if we were looking at these kind of dollars.
So if you could just clarify, Director Fondulis, what would your recommendation be for an amount for the near term funding?
Maybe for the next 6 months or so.
For 6 months, what do you think would be appropriate?
For the next 6 months, 50,000.
Okay, thank you.
If it is, it can be designated for human services needs or whatever we want to call it, basic needs. But obviously, if not utilized, then it stays in the pot. I don't know what the reporting Paige mentioned about, and I know I've talked to Cindy at one point about reporting for this funding. So I'm not quite sure how that all plays out, but certainly I would say no more than 50,000.
Mr. Burke, did you want to answer Director Fondulis' question about reporting, and then we have to go to Moderator Evan and Council Bordelon?
I don't think it'll be, as long as we're tracking as the money's given out, I don't think the reporting after the fact will be too difficult. We just want to make sure we're all following the same procedures. We're all tracking the same, abiding by the rules. That's part of why we need that navigator position, is to be more of an expert on these things. I wondered, is Representative Conley or anyone else, is there a feel for when evictions or what's going on when we think evictions might really start hitting, or what to expect? Does anybody have a feel for that?
Sure, Representative Conley, can you hear us? Oh, there you go. Hi.
I think so. I think I have enough if you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
There is discussion we had today in the House and the Senate about extending the governor's executive orders, which would have to happen by the 30th of September. And I think folks are still having that discussion. That would extend the Unite CT program longer. So we are in flux, but hopefully before your next meeting, we have that solid update for you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go. Moderator Evan has waited patiently.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fondulis, for that. I guess what I'm missing in that, I think for one, I think that the word you really want is not supplant, but augment. At least I'm hoping that's what you mean. So you want to augment these funds. But what I prefer to hear for this type of short-term needs assessment is, how many people are you serving? How much is demand exceeding the amount of your existing funds? What kinds of needs are going unmet? And so, to my mind, that's what you need to know. So where did the 330 households that you mentioned come from? Where does the $500 to $800 amount come from? So, I mean, it seems great, but I think it needs to be embedded in a little bit of empirical data that I would like to know, which is what are the needs? I give money to those funds, for food, and, I never actually know what happens to it, which is fine, but I'm hoping that it's filling a need that folks in Groton have. And so it would be useful to have that kind of data of how many families are applying. You mentioned that hardly any families are looking for utility help, rent help, and even food help. So, so that's one part of my question, is if you could embed it in a little empirical data, that would be helpful for me. The second part is that you said 50,000 for 6 months, and just doing the math on your numbers, it would come out closer to 133,000 if those numbers that you gave us are what you believe to be true, because that's half of a third of the $800,000 value. So I'm not sure where the 50,000 comes from. So again, a little, if we could get a little more data, I'm happy to support it, but I would just love to know what it's based on. Thanks.
I think that's a totally valid point. And also, I want to keep in mind, though, we also want money that doesn't have to go through the long process, so that if we start suddenly getting evictions, there are money on hand that the council or others can tap into. So I think it's a bit of both. What's needing now and what's anticipated for potential needs, sort of like having a fund balance.
Director Von Dull, is the 330 number that moderator Evans cited, is that your normal caseload of families that you serve?
No, that was a guesstimate. That was a guess. And we are able, have been for the 29 years that I've worked in the department, we have been able to always assist people based on the donations or the special grants or the trust funds that we have available to us. We are not dependent on the ARPA funding to continue our program. The assistance we give is we limit the assistance because we are trying to stretch the funds. Indeed, we had the Spicer Fund for I don't know how many years, 20 some odd years of the Spicer Fund that stretched that trust fund as to the last penny. And we are very used to working with the clients to say, okay, we are going to be able to pay such and such on your bill, but you are going to need to come up with the balance that's due. And people are able to do that. And they understand that there are limited funds available. With this funding, it is, I've been sort of in a quandary as to what exactly the town wants me to do with it. As far as we could take, if you gave us 10,000, we would stretch it as far as we possibly could. If you gave us 100,000, we would still stretch it as far as we possibly could. I don't know what the town's wish is as far as that is concerned. I've been, as I say, basically working guesstimates on this. At the present time, we are not seeing the same volume of clients that we have prior to COVID. And I think part of it is because there have been extra funds given to families, sent to families through federal programs that have benefited them. But that there still are things happening in Congress. We're not sure exactly what additional funding is going to be coming. So I feel right now as if I'm working with some guesstimates more so than actual numbers. And our actual numbers can change. That's the one thing about our department, is that we can have no business one week, or not no business, but very, few clients one week, and the next week see many more people. And there's not necessarily any rhyme or reason to it. It's people's individual circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
And Mayor, I would say that, part of this is just that not necessarily direct all these dollars to a particular purpose at this point. It's a pot that the council and RTM can tap into. So it doesn't even have to be put towards human services at this point. It could just be, what amount generally do you want to have on hand just in case?
Okay,
And then you vote on it as needs come up.
thank you for clarifying. Counselor Bordelon.
Thank you. I too think having a little bit of data, I think it would be important moving forward to have some type of numbers that we can use in the future and have when we're looking into our budget season as well. Currently, we're looking at pandemic issues. Do we currently have gas assistance as well? Like, I know I referred a client and they said that they had to call the church and then the church gave them a gas card. Is that still the way in which they achieve getting gas assistance, Mrs. Fundulis?
We have a program that we operate through the Mystic Ecumenical Council that provides vouchers for gas, some vouchers for food, also some gift cards for food. But that is what we use primarily when we have someone that is in need of gasoline. And church does refer people to us, but we also have permission from the Ecumenical Council to use that fund if we have someone that was not referred by the church, but someone that the social workers are working with that needs gasoline assistance.
Okay, so it's kind of a little more discretionary because, all right. And then the other thing, because I'm just looking at the needs and accessibility because of the fluctuation. Is there curbside pickup available where if people are handicapped or immune compromised, that we're bringing the food out to them?
Yes, we've been doing that right along.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I guess it's a little confusing to me. This is one of my passions, is the human resources and services. This is to me what this money was really about on a direct impact level. And yet today we do not have statistical data to back that information, but we talked in great length about making sure the businesses that were impacted, which is another huge need, but we're talking about human lives like food, shelter, water, food, attainable resources, gas. And so I think when we look at this big pot of money, as it's been called, this is one we really need to narrow down. And I think we really need to bring some more data. And I heard tonight, respect the staff and what they bring. And it's no disrespect as a counselor to ask questions, because at the end of the day in the community, I'm elected to ask questions of my staff, of our community, on behalf of our community. And that's not an insult. That's a way of collaboration and working together. So I feel in this department, we need a little bit more work. We need some more numbers, more information, more collaborative efforts, like talking about like how we get the funds into the hands of the folks that need it the most. And so for that, I would like to see how we can generate some more topics of discussion and really pick this apart on a more in-depth level to make sure we're meeting the needs. Some of the things that I read from outside services that I saw people needing in the COVID pandemic relief that were losing funds was helping people buy a bicycle to get to work, $25, $30, $100. There's it should be a broad spectrum of thought process here when looking at the needs for folks in this area. This is the bread and butter, as some would say. This is the make or break. This is the part of the town where we really should be putting the most emphasis on, because we're talking about quality of life. Not about what we can do with infrastructure and other areas in our town. That's also important, but this is really important to me. So is there a way that we can map this, collaborate, brainstorm, maybe for the next meeting? I know we have a plan for the businesses, but how do we wrap this in to make sure you know, the folks, one of the needs, and I just wanted to address was a person who was
Your
being,
time's up.
I didn't know may I finish? May I have the floor to finish my last point?
This is a council meeting, so go ahead. Finish up,
Okay.
please.
The person of interest that I'm speaking on behalf of tonight that I helped, they had to leave because of a mold issue and they had nowhere to go and they were living in low income housing, and I helped them refer to this department, and everybody was extremely professional and very helpful. But one of the needs that was met, they put them in a hotel that had no cooking facilities. So one of the needs I'd like to address in this area is making sure that we have microwavable foods and foods that they were giving them, like pasta and other things, and we need to think also outside the box of having a separate need maybe for people who can't cook and don't have stove tops. This person had exhausted all of their funding going to food pantries and soup kitchens on gas. So I think this is really important to look at. And I just wanted to see if there's a way we could collaborate on that.
Right, very good. So what we need to do, I know there's an urgency to get money into the hands of people, as you've stated several times, and we agree with you on that. But in order to do that, this body needs to recommend to the council, who then has to allocate the funding. So we need an idea tonight, whether you're comfortable with the 50,000, I'm sorry, the 50,000 that Director Fondulis is suggesting. Mr. Burt, I was expecting it to be a higher number than that, and I just wanted to know what your sense was of the 50,000. Do you think that's sufficient? We could always come back and put more.
Well, I think now this is based on what I've been hearing earlier, what we've all heard earlier from this group, that we want some flexibility.
Right.
We know we already have to set aside the 86,000 to 56,000, however much we're going to need for our own position. So we need whatever amount we set. It's got to have to include all those three things. 50,000 or whatever is for this, but you're probably going to want a little more than that too. Now, unless we're going to change how we've been talking about things, new programs we've talked about using an application process. So right now we're talking about existing programs. In terms of empirical, it seems to me, I don't know, Marge, do you track? I think now is not the time to be too stingy with the dollars. So let's say do you track how much is requested for each person versus how much is given? It'd be nice to know what the difference is between that. And let's say you usually give out limits at 500. Well, do you have a recommendation that there's typically in a given month, we do this number of, this number of electric assistants, blah, 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 at this amount each. And that, so if you average that out, we want to double that. And then 6 months of that, there might be a way to come up with those dollars based on past history as a starting point.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes.
As I had suggested, that we, as I say, currently we limit the assistance we give to 400. That is not usually the amount of rent that's owed or the utility bill that is owed. It's a portion of that payment that is owed. And we only pay that 400 after the client has come up with the balance that is due. And then we tell, say, Groton Utilities that we will pay the 400 after the client has paid the balance that is owed on the account. Rents are phenomenally higher than 400. So we are paying a portion of what is owed on various bills. The ARPA funds would give us the opportunity to pay more towards those existing bills. As I said earlier, we base our assistance grants now on the fact that we're trying to stretch our available funds. And if we had more funds available, then we would be able to give increased amounts in our grants to clients.
Now, yeah, that's great. And I think that's the intent, is to get more money to them. But I think what's helpful is, do you know though, can you go back and see how much was requested? What was the individual's match to get that 400 for rent? What did you do for utilities? That type of thing, so that we could know some past history, so we could extrapolate a reasonable number for a 6-month period.
I will do my best to give you that information.
Okay.
So I would ask that we confine our remarks to a dollar amount, because there is going to be a lag in process. Like, we have to make the recommendation. We being the council has to have a meeting, and it's going to take some time. So if we delay this further coming out of this body, then it's just going to delay further when it gets into the hands of the people who are coming to Director Fondulis for help. So if we could confine our remarks to what amount we think would be appropriate to allocate for the near-term funding, that would be much appreciated. Councilor Moderator Evan.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to propose a number. And I think I liked Mr. Burt's idea of having a pot that, was going to, just sit there and isn't necessarily earmarked for specific needs. So I was going to say, just based on Ms. Fondulis's data, or rather lack of data, but the numbers that she gave us, that maybe 150,000, something like that might be the pot. But I do want to stress that personally, I really want to see that empirical data, because I understand from what she's saying that she can stretch even 10,000 to meet, the people who are coming, but I don't think that's what we're asking. We're asking, what is the need? And more specifically, what is the unmet need? And that's what I really want to know. How many people are coming to ask, what are their needs, irrespective of what your limits are or what your financial, current financial limits are. So I think that would make me feel better, but I think 150,000 would be a pot big enough, just based on the numbers that Ms. Fondulis gave, it would be 133. Perhaps there are other, needs that are going to have to kind of come out of that. I don't know, but obviously if it's not spent, it can be reallocated very easily, I'm imagining. So that's my suggestion.
And just to
I'll
mention, we have
second
about
Moderator
250.
Evans' motion.
And just to mention, well, that's just one piece of it, though. Just keep in mind, we need about 250,000 to cover COG, our position, some of those other things. So that we're at about 400,000 now. Is there any other buffer we want to keep in that pot?
So that's what I was going to ask. So Moderator Evan, when you're suggesting the 150, you're talking about that is money that has not been earmarked for anything else.
That's money that would go into, say, a kind of a urgent need human services type pot to be added to the, ledge light pot, if that's what you're adding in.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask. If you meant for the ledge light and the navigator position to be separate from your 150.
Yes, the 150 was really just responding to urgent human services needs within the next, say, 6 months.
Okay.
And
then
then
we
there's
have
some type of emergency fund. And so
Right.
maybe it's, so that's what I was just suggesting.
Okay.
And then we'd have ongoing dialogue here in the short term to figure out the empirical evidence and where, what Marge is suggesting for a program to move forward.
So, Mr. Burt, you added something in at the end of Councilor Evan. I did it again. Moderator Evans' comment. If it would be the 150, say the ballpark, 90 for the navigator, 60 for the navigator, 90 for ledge light. So that's, you're looking at maybe like 150, 150.
Right, about 100, I'm gonna put down Paige and Tabitha, correct me. I was just earmarking probably 100,000 for our navigator position. Remember, the other position was shared among many towns. Yeah.
Okay, so then
But-
what?
and just to remind you, we're not moving forward with anything without that position. We have to have that position.
Right, okay, so what would the number be that we're looking at?
That right there is 400,000. If you count the two that have already been, you've already approved at the council level, though, the 86 and the 56, and the RTM has done the ledge light, but not the COG yet. That's coming, that's gonna go to a committee soon, I believe, for the RTM. So
Yeah,
that 400 would be with those numbers in there, just so you know, so you could, back those out for if you're talking additional dollars. So you'd be talking, and then, but is there any, does the council want some committee and council and RTM want some flexibility, though, that things don't have to go through the longer process? Do you want a cushion in there? Like, that's about 400,000. Do you want a total of 500,000 just in case there's some other request that comes up?
I am more comfortable with a higher number to be able to respond quickly to people than a smaller number, and for having people to jump through tons of hoops. I understand there's going to be documentation no matter what, but personally, I could support Moderator Evan and definitely support what you just said, Mr. Burt. Councilor Bordelon, could you speak to the amount that you would like to see, please?
Yes, I just had a clarifying before I go to the amount. The 400 that Marge Fundula spoke of, is that $400 a year?
That is what, under normal budget operations, the grants are limited to $400 a year for a family. But what we're talking about now, when we're saying 400 is 400,000.
I understand that. My clarifying point was the 400 for the individual, to kind of make sure the number I was thinking. Because I think that's, so yeah, I can support what Moderator Evans had stated for the 150, maybe the 500,000 for the total pot, because I do think it's important that folks that are trying to meet the need, they need to be able to generate a positive revenue. And so if we're stretching funds and saying you only can get this much because we're trying to make a little bit go really far, it's causing financial stress on those folks. And so if they're not meeting the full need, they're never getting ahead. And that's one of the things of folks in need who need financial support that we're finding. So looking at that pot of 500,000, it's really important, because that 400 for the year, or only paying partial this, if you're only making X amount of dollars, you're never getting ahead. And the hope is that you want people to be able to have a little bit of a positive revenue on their next paycheck. So being able to pay off a bill in its entirety could really take the stress and emotional stress off of somebody. So I could support those numbers of the 500 and have things move in a fashion that would support that. But again, I think having the data in the future would be very helpful. Thank you.
Agreed. And we will bring this back for further discussion too, as details. And I want to make sure, as part of 500, we have money. We might start talking businesses and learn there's a hugely pressing need that we need to meet right now. So that's part of the reason to have the buffer, is if something else like that comes up.
And when these, and one more question to that, the folks that apply for this, will we start capturing that data moving forward?
Yeah.
They have to capture it for records in order to
Yeah.
receive the money.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Bronk.
Thank you. My simple comment was that I did recommend a buffer, somewhat of a contingency. So we're doing our best to understand what the needs are. And we're clearly talking about short-term or urgent needs, but human services, that's probably the lion's share, but maybe it's not all. And as Mr. Burt was saying, maybe there are some business needs, and I'm not advocating specifically for that, but it could be a category that we're unaware of at this point that would also fall in that bucket. So I just wanted to ensure that we round up a little bit so that this bucket can cover something that maybe we don't know yet.
And one thing to mention too is we've received half the money. I think that was mid-June, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. As we get towards that next cycle too, we can always add more near-term dollars on as we're programming things out. So it doesn't mean, this can certainly be adjusted later. It's really just to get right through the immediate need.
Okay, very good. So then the other thing we need to bring to council is the public outreach process. I'm assuming we have to bring all three of these things, or the two things, together to council in order to get the ball rolling.
Right.
Okay, so then we need to decide, we need to hear about the amended flow chart. I'm assuming Ms. Harkin put it together. And then we have to decide if we're ready to send that forward to council in order to get this going and get money in people's hands. So Mr. Burt,
I have a quick point of clarification before we move to the next topic.
what is it?
Other towns have already started to allocate these funds, and I just want to make sure the 500, looking at our density and population compared to some of the other municipalities that have started to allocate funds, I just wanted to ask the town manager, where are we standing and what some of those other towns have put forward in this department?
It's all over the place. And what you're seeing in some places is they put out plans and then they started pulling back on it, like in Norwich. It's really whatever you think is appropriate for your own town. I think 500 is the minimum. I would not be adverse to having a little more buffer. Whatever people think.
Do you have any information on what Norwich put forward, or any New London or surrounding municipalities at all?
I've seen, I don't have any, there's been some articles in the paper on those, but I don't have them with me. I'm sorry.
If you could bring those to the next meeting, that would be helpful, just to see that
Sure.
we're kind of in line.
And actually, I'll try to remember to email it out in the next day or two.
The
Thank
other
you.
thing is, this is a recommendation from the Long-Term Recovery Committee, but the council's going to make the decision, then we're going to hand it off to the RTM. So
Right.
it's got to go through a long process. So I'm eager to get it out there and rolling so that we can make the money available. Are you turning it over to Ms. Harkin for the flow chart?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. So this flow chart hasn't changed too much from what you saw at the last meeting, other than we've added some dates to it. And we've also added the bucket of identification of near-term needs. So it starts off on the blue with the needs assessment phase 1, and that needs assessment is starting already. We've already met with people. We've signed the contract for Being the Table, the engagement platform, and we're working on trainings as we speak. We have training scheduled throughout the month to get the platform up and running. And once we get that out, we'll be doing things like a postcard that we can send home with kids at school. We're talking about doing those kiosks, dedicated computers where people can use the survey information at the senior center, at the library, at the community center. We've talked about signage at major intersections with the link information if they want to give more feedback. We're talking about Groton TV, getting Sean Greeley to do a ticker or something on Groton TV. So really trying to get the word out that we're looking for feedback and blue sky ideas in that needs assessment phase 1. And then the needs assessment phase 2, which is in October, November, we come back to the group here and we facilitate the categorization of all these projects into these buckets, as Paige has mentioned, and then prioritize those buckets according to a rating criteria. So, and I want to say that all this time in the background, I'm working on the application materials for the grant program. I actually met with Sima last week and that we had a chance to chat about how we could better facilitate that and how the application can get tweaked. So thank you, Sima. I'm working on that. So then needs assessment phase 2 is October, November, like I mentioned, the buckets, we prioritize the buckets. And then in October, November, late on the later side, we finalize that funding strategy and then gather some community feedback on the funding strategy. So we'll have all the major categories of things and then asking people, well, where would you put your money? How much of it would you allocate to X, Y, and Z? And so then we'll have these allocations, general allocations that we can then bring to preliminary town council in that blue box in the middle there in November. So we're referring a draft funding strategy and grant application to town council, and then going to an opening of grant applications in November, December, and then town council's approval and allocation in December, January, and subrecipient awards in January, March. And then on that parallel track, identification of near-term needs, as we've been doing tonight, will move forward a little faster. So any questions?
I'll ask a question since it seems like Mayor Granatowski has stepped away for a second. I didn't hear, or maybe I just missed it. I see in the paper that a lot of the communities like Stonington and other ones are having community meetings with the public. And are you planning to have that in our needs assessment phase? Because I know the kiosks sound nifty, but I can tell you my 92-year-old mother is not going to use a kiosk at the library or the senior center. So I think you're going to need to have meetings that are in person to the extent that is possible, because there are a lot of people who don't have computers and who won't really want to have a computer interface involved in doing a survey.
We hear that. We are limited by, meeting requirements for the town, and we're not allowed to meet in person right now, but I think we can have probably smaller groups go out and have interactions with the seniors. I have a really good relationship lately with Mary Jo, and I think we could work something out that helps meet that need.
Yeah, I mean, I know the senior center is having classes, so they are grouping together to at least do that, because my mother goes to them. So they are meeting. And it would just be a matter of, maybe being able to, be there or have someone there as your representative to, maybe have paper surveys or have a discussion. But I just want to suggest that computers are not going to get you really the opinion of the town. They're going to get you the opinion of the people who have and use computers.
Okay. I apologize. I have to step away for a moment. Was Ms. Harkin done presenting? Yes, I assume she is. Mr. Burt, did you want to add anything?
No, just point well taken on the in-person. The hard part's the short time frame to get things going. We'll give more thought to that. Yeah, my preference would be to have some in person too, but we'll have to figure that out.
Maybe if we have ideas, we can shoot them to you or to Ms. Harkin as to ways or places to reach people.
That'd be great.
Okay, very good. Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you. I just want to align my marks with Moderator Eben. I think in person is important. It's not just age, but disability. Folks, some people can't read written language and they have other disabilities. And so they could be the ones who need the services the most and may need to be captured. And I think making sure everything's dual language, multi-language. If it's on computer, then you probably can go endless. But there are folks that are blind, that are seniors, that have macular degenerative eye disease, that may need help with these forms and may need someone to bring them and advocate and help them, navigate the system. And I think we need to open up those doors and those lines of communication to meet the needs of everybody. There have been things I've seen where they've done curbside, where there's been things where you pull up under the awning and you have a tablet out and you start to manipulate the tablet for the client or person in need or a person who's giving feedback, and you could actually verbally ask them the question, things like that. There's ways that we can do this outside the box and limit our exposure, but still, like Moderator Emmons stated, people are still gathering. Doctors and nurses are still collecting data and seeing patients. This is a need based on the response of COVID, and we have to, make those connects. So I'm open to suggestions on how we can do that, but I think the curbside is one way, and it could be very helpful.
I think we could have one meeting in October that's in person with masks required at the senior center.
All right, great.
Among other ideas.
Well, if you say it, John, it's okay.
As long as they're masks, that's the main rule.
So is there the agenda item indicated that the manager would like us to recommend this plan to the council? Is there any objection to recommending this plan to the council? All right, very good. Thank you. All right, so Mr. Burt, then
I apologize. I did have my hand up. I couldn't click the button.
I yielded the floor. I apologize to you for it.
Nope. I just the time frame on that. Is there any way to try to move some of those items a little bit quicker in its intensity? Some of this stuff is not going to hit into possibly January. With winter coming and the needs of folks, like there's a need greater now with the holidays coming up and things like that. I know we have the emergency funds that would be available, but I don't know. And where do we stand with our rollout in comparison? I guess it's good to look at, we're all new at doing this. So we're not perfect, and I don't expect to be, but it is good to see and collaborate and see how other municipalities of our size are rolling this out to make sure that we're, doing it in our own way, but are they doing it faster, or should we be pulling back, or are we right on target?
Well, all I could tell you is, well, I'll get the info on Norwich and Stonington and some of those, but Mayor Hedrick, you were there too. My sense from COG when we've talked about this is most people do not have a plan yet. They want to get the navigator position in to know how to spend the money and what's appropriate.
Right. And the other issue with that is people are concerned. They want to make sure that if they spend the money, they spend it on the right thing, because if you don't, you got to pay it back to the feds and it comes out of hide. So there could be a cost if you try to go too fast. I recognize there's a need, but you also need to be judicious in what you do. Now, if the money's going to go to social services, then you'd want the money to go to social services anyway, and you're not going to feel bad about that if you have to pay for that out of the tax base, because we're already doing it. So that makes sense. The amount of money, the 500 makes sense, and moving it forward makes sense from this committee. So that's just my opinion.
Alternative, I mean, I don't see a way to do the public input in a more speedy manner. I think it's whether the council wants public input or not.
Well, the council.
I shouldn't say council. I should say this committee, then the council. Sorry.
The council is eager to hear from this body, so
Yeah.
I know we want to hear and we want to get moving on things. So I'm here to kind of try to help move it along. So, all right, great. So then we are on to the open discussion items. And Mr. Burt, you indicated you wanted Director Fondulis to talk Unite CT. Is that correct?
You know, she touched on it some, and I guess, you know, Marge, just if you can confirm that you do have somebody trained, that you've been putting the word out. Is there a person, I forgot, is it, who's doing it over in New London for the region? Who's got the actual certification? Who trained you, your person there, Marge?
Our social worker, Kim Gordy, went to New London Homeless Hospitality
That's
Center.
Homeless Hospitality, okay. Now, they were gonna do some time over here too. Are they doing that?
They sent someone for the first couple of weeks and had, I think, 2 people that came in, and that was it. There was no other business for them. We had announced it. We had a banner out. We had Facebook postings. I mean, and they had done the same thing. There just wasn't business. So that person is now back at the New London Homeless Hospitality office.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I think everyone has spoken. Is there anything else that Mr. Burt, you wanted to defer to any of the other members to give updates on anything?
I don't think so. I think there's I'm just making sure I have all the homework. If we want to recap, maybe. We will send in the 500,000 and the flow chart to the council. The 500 would then go on to the RTM also, but certainly update them on the process. I will get out articles to the group for what places have done plans so far. And then everybody, if you have, please by preferably ended tomorrow, or very early Monday at the latest, if you have ideas or people contacts for ideas for business entities, please, so we can get that word out. I'd like to get the invite out Tuesday at the very latest if possible, because that still is only 2 weeks and a day after that. Is there anything else I'm missing? Marge, you'll look at some of the empirical data and try to put together some stuff, see what you have.
That's all I had in my notes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think you're going to want that definitely prior to when it hits council and goes on to RTM, because you'll probably
Right.
have a lot of questions on that.
Right,
So,
and that's probably going to be the 28th March for the
Yes.
council.
Yes. But that's all I had in my notes, Mr. Burt. I know that's all that's on the agenda, and all the other notes I had taken when we were setting the agenda. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by
Seconded.
Kevin, seconded by, was that Bronk?
Yes.
In the minutes again. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for all your ideas. We're moving in the right direction, guys. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good meeting.
Good night.